Cu încântare vă mărturisesc că este prima dată când văd atât de multe doamne la această conferință și sunt convinsă că veți savura discursul următoarei noastre invitate, pentru că își dorește să susțină și să promoveze femeile la locurile de muncă și mai mult decât atât, să reducă din acel decalaj, acea diferență dintre, să spunem, salariul unui domn și salariul unei femei. De asemenea, trebuie să vă mai mărturisesc că este o fostă campioană sportivă cu 18 ani de experiență profesională, incluzând domeniile dreptului, afacerilor și antreprenoriatului. De asemenea, a petrecut 2 ani lucrând ca avocat corporatist înainte de a petrece aproape un deceniu ca și consultant de management la Boston Consulting Group. Trebuie să vă mai mărturisesc că este foarte preocupată și se concentrează pe acele etape critice din viața unei femei, am spune despre fertilitate, despre pierderile în timp a unei sarcini și începutul perioadei de părinție, cu care sunt convinsă că poate v-ați confruntat și dumneavoastră. Despre cum ați făcut față sau nu, nu vă întreb, însă aștept să ne mărturisească invitata noastră, Zarja Cibej.
Thank you. The ticker. Good morning. What an honor to be here with you. Thank you for bringing your energy and your attention to this room. I am very excited to talk to you about a topic that has become very dear to me over the last few years, and that is business and spirituality. Now, the introduction told you that I was a founder and a CEO of a company, Tamarin. And in fact, when I was invited to this conference last year, that was still my role. It's not anymore. I'll tell you why and how that has changed. Just a few weeks ago, we signed the final papers to sell the company. Now, this marks a very happy ending of a 7-year-old journey for me, my colleagues, my employees, my clients, my investors. But it wasn't always looking like it's going to be a happy ending. In fact, 2.5 years ago, I felt that neither me nor the business were making progress. I felt that the business was not growing fast enough. And I felt that me as a leader, while I was a big asset of the company, I was also a biggest liability in the company. I felt that my own limitations as a business leader were stopping the business from growing. Now, in the introduction, they told you that the company focused on what we call critical life stages, when employees are most vulnerable, especially female employees. And these are the life stages of fertility, events of pregnancy loss, early parenthood, childcare, menopause, and elder care. We know that employees, and especially women, during those life stages are most likely to either reduce their working hours, forego promotions to senior positions, or simply drop out of the workforce. Of course, it's very important to employers to retain this workforce, and the solutions that we were developing were helping them retain their precious workforce. But as I mentioned, I wasn't happy with the progress. Now, I have always been very focused on personal development and quite fortunate that for the last 15 years, I have received a lot of executive coaching. Throughout my career as a management consultant and later as an entrepreneur, and in fact already in the business school. But it was during that time, 2.5 years ago, that I discovered my notes from the coaching session, from the very first coaching session that I had in 2007. And I realized that the challenges that I was experiencing then as a business leader were the same 12 years later. Of course, you're curious, you want to know what my challenges were. My number one challenge was giving harsh feedback to my employees and my colleagues. And the other one was around discomfort of selling. I didn't feel comfortable as a salesperson. And that was the same 12 years later, despite all the work that I have done. And I'm a former athlete. Whatever I do it with a lot of determination. I put a lot of energy into it. And so I didn't understand why was this happening. Why was I not making enough progress? And so about 2.5 years ago, I started a journey into a much deeper work into myself. Recently, I started calling this a spiritual journey. And as I reflect back on this journey, there are a lot of lessons for businesses and business leaders that I wanted to share with you today, and hopefully you're going to find them useful. I want to put 2 ideas forward today. Spirituality can indeed help your business to progress, and it can help it elevate. And any business transformation starts with an individual, with you and me. Before we dive deeper, I want to demystify the term spirituality. What does spirituality mean for logical, rational, analytical, fact-driven people like you and me? Some people talk about spirituality as neutral religion. Some people link spirituality to quantum physics. So what is it really? Of course, I looked into Google, I asked ChatGPT, I read a lot of books, and here is a list of things that define spirituality today, because there isn't one definition of spirituality. Spirituality is about self-realization and personal growth. Spirituality is about connection with nature, appreciating and understanding the interconnectedness of the world that we live in. It's about mindfulness and presence. It's about being here, right now, and nowhere else, because this is the only moment that we get. It's about personal connection to the sacred and transcendent. There is still so much that we don't know about this world, about the universe, and how it all works. Just accepting the fact that we don't know everything. In fact, we have just heard from the previous speaker that there is only a tiny slice of reality that we see. What else is out there that we don't see? And how can we leverage all of that that's still around us, but we cannot see? Spirituality is also about search for meaning and purpose, getting in touch with your true self and your true desires. It's about community and relationships. This is about belonging, our need to belong and to be part of something bigger than ourselves. It's also about inner peace and well-being. Now, what does spirituality mean for me? And I think this is important because it provides a context for the rest of the presentation. For me, spirituality is ability to tap into our truest and strongest gifts that we were born into this life with, and manifesting them in a way that benefits not just me, but everyone around me and everything around me. Now, spirituality is actually closely linked with science too. Some of the most famous scientists have been either very spiritual or have credited spirituality for their scientific achievements. Let me list just a few of them. Of course, you all know Albert Einstein, Nikola Tesla, Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, the renowned psychiatrist and psychoanalyst Carl Jung, Max Planck, the father of quantum theory. So what do they say about spirituality? Carl Jung says, spirituality was essential for psychological health and development. It's also a fundamental part of human life and necessary for a process of personal development and self-realization. Max Planck, the father of quantum theory, says spirituality is essential for understanding the deeper mysteries of the world. Nikola Tesla, the renowned inventor, says the gift of mental power comes from the divine. What he means by that is the superconsciousness, is that we actually don't quite see, but it's quite powerful. And if we concentrate our minds on that truth, we become in tune with this great power. Indeed, he credited a lot of his inventions. He was inspired by a spiritual source, he says. Okay. Universities are starting to treat spirituality as a serious topic as well. Columbia University was one of the first Ivy League universities that has launched a graduate program in spirituality a few years ago. And the Massachusetts Institute for Technology already 10 years ago ran a study with executives among which there was a consensus that companies that focus on spiritual practice are actually more profitable. And this leads me to the next point. This is why actually spirituality is relevant for business. So why does it really matter, and why does it matter to you in the HR industry? Why does it matter to you as leaders of the business? Spirituality affects 3 pillars of your business, the research shows. Employees, leadership, and brand. So what do we mean by that? Research shows that employees who engage in spiritual practice improve their well-being, productivity, engagement, ability to innovate, and their sense of belonging. Leaders who engage in spiritual practice experience enhancement in their emotional intelligence. Their leadership improves in terms of ethics and integrity. They reduce stress, improve decision-making, and improve team dynamics. And when it comes to brands, latest research suggests that millennials and younger generations prefer brands that have a meaning and purpose behind them. They're much more likely to buy from them. Now, it isn't just research. Many companies are starting to adopt in their practices, in their day-to-day operations, different spiritual practices. For example, Patagonia, the outdoor clothing company, their mission and focus is very much on the planet. They're focused on the planet. They're saying we're in the business to save our home planet. And they integrate spirituality through its commitment to the environmental sustainability and encourage their employees to spend time and connect with the nature. Salesforce emphasized the concept of ohana. That's the Hawaiian meaning term for the meaning of family. They want to foster a supportive and inclusive community. They want to foster the sense of belonging and purpose. And Google, more than a decade ago, started a program called Search Inside Yourself. This program has been so successful that they spun it off as a separate entity, and that entity, as a non-profit organization now, serves other organizations and their employees. There's also a saying that meaning is the new money. But at this point, I also wanted to share with you my own first spiritual experience, if you will. In my 20s, I suffered from debilitating headaches. They would come out of nowhere. They would last a day, 2, sometimes 3. They would knock me down. I would have to put myself into a dark room. Even when I walked around the house, I had to wear sunglasses. Needless to say, I couldn't function, I couldn't study, I couldn't work. Doctors said everything was okay with me. They couldn't find anything wrong with me. And because my father was suffering from the same type of debilitating headaches, they said, well, it's just something that you guys have in family. But this was happening once a month. If I was lucky, once every 2 months. When I was studying for my business degree at Wharton, which is part of the University of Pennsylvania, the medical school of the University of Pennsylvania was just launching an intense mindfulness course. And my coach at the time suggested, Zarja, go, I think it would help you. And indeed, that course changed my life. Now, what we did in that course was, we met every week for 3 hours, we learned about mindfulness, and we practiced meditation together. And then every day, for 45 to 60 minutes, we meditated on our own. what that meditation helped me with was to get really in tune with my body first. And I decoded what I now call the anatomy of my headache. Before my headache was here, it was in my neck. Before it was in my neck, it was in my shoulders. Before shoulders, it was in the shoulder blade. In fact, it was behind here that it was starting. That's where the muscles first contracted. And then the pain kind of shoot up. Because I was becoming aware of that and how my body worked, I was able to catch the headache in its earlier stages so it wasn't as debilitating. And then as the next step, I started to learn, I started to understand what the triggers for these headaches were. It was simple things like I was running late for a meeting or a class. I was under pressure to submit something. A deadline was coming up. I was afraid of the feedback that I was going to receive, or indeed, I received the feedback that I wasn't happy with. That created like a little twitch in my muscle back here, which then developed sometimes in a very, very bad headache. But because of that awareness, because of that knowledge of my body and mind, from then on, I was able, every time I was running late for a meeting and started feeling a little weird, I said, okay, Zarja, it's all right. The world around you is still the world around you. You're fine. You're safe. You don't have to develop a headache. And I'm very happy to report that in the 15 years since, I didn't have more than 5 headaches. Truly, this changed my life. I was able to heal my body. Something that the doctors were unable to help me with. This is the power of one of the spiritual practices. And this brings me to the next point, which is really about how can we transform the world around us? How can we transform the businesses that we run? How can we transform the teams that we manage? How can we transform the environments around us? It all starts with personal work. It all starts with an individual. It starts with you and it starts with me. Now, at the beginning of the presentation, I told you that 2.5 years ago, I wasn't quite happy with the growth of my business. I also wasn't quite happy with my ability to sell. But that was critical for the growth of the business. So I'm going to share one more thing with you, even more vulnerable, personal story. Through very intense and, let's say, slightly advanced spiritual practice where I engaged in timeline therapy and also astrology. Yes, the planets also impact how we are. I came to the following realization. I was ashamed of what I was selling. I'm going to say this again. I was ashamed of what I was selling. Despite the fact that this was something I had worked for years on. It was essentially my third baby. And I found myself realizing, I'm selling something that I'm uncomfortable with. At that same moment, I also realized why. You see, I grew up as an athlete. I grew up training alpine skiing. I was in a team of all boys. I was always competing with boys. I always needed to be as strong as the boys. Being a girl, being a female, being a woman, I perceived with being weak. And of course, I didn't want to share my weaknesses. Yet the business and the solutions that I developed were all about vulnerability. Women being vulnerable through the fertility stages, women being vulnerable as young mothers, women being vulnerable as they go through hormonal changes in their menopause, women being vulnerable when they have to look after their elderly parents. But because I didn't want to show weaknesses, I projected that on others. And if I cannot be weak, you cannot be weak. And yet I'm trying to sell you something that admits that you're weak and that I'm weak. And when I realized that, I realized, what nonsense. What utter nonsense. I should not be ashamed of that. I should be proud of that. And in that moment of realization, of that convoluted thinking, when I identified it, I could also feel a tremendous release of energy coming through my body. All those feelings, all those emotions, all those unhealthy things that were stored in my body were released at the moment of that realization. I kid you not, I thought at that moment that I will be on Mars before Elon Musk. I thought I was going to launch with all that energy. Sure enough, the next meeting, the next speech I went into, I was a different person. I wasn't selling any differently. My presentation skills didn't change, my product didn't change, but I changed. And I went into the meeting with a different energy. I talked about my product with pride, as opposed to that hidden shame. Seemingly a small change, but it turned everything around. In fact, it was the starting point for the acceleration of the growth of the business, which ultimately led to the sale of the business a few weeks ago. 10 years of traditional executive coaching did not get me close to that. It was the deeper spiritual modalities that I'm going to talk about just a little later that helped me with that. The key to the change, I realize, or any change, especially if you want a faster, more effective change, is the subconscious mind. You probably heard we have a conscious part of our mind and we have the subconscious part of our mind. Research suggests that only 5% of our mind that is conscious, it's 5%, and the subconscious mind is 95%. What's the difference really between these two minds? The conscious mind controls the immediate awareness and also the rational thought process, whereas the subconscious mind operates below, so to speak, the conscious mind and controls automatic functions. It does a hell of a lot of work and very complex work in our bodies. It produces cells, it produces 3 million cells every single second. It breathes, it digests, it controls reflexes and so on. It is incredibly powerful. The conscious mind sets the goals, but the subconscious mind stores memories and beliefs. And research shows that 75% of those beliefs are negative. I invite you to think about your own negative beliefs. That time that you wanted a promotion and you thought, too early, I'm still not good enough. The time when you wanted a salary raise, not me, that colleague is better, they deserve it. That time you wanted to start going to the gym regularly, no, I'm not disciplined enough. There's much more. Self-sabotage is actually very, very real. And it's grounded in those beliefs that we have developed during our youth. And the only way to access them and the only way to change them is to tap into your subconscious mind. Now, there's one more statistic I want to share with you that always blows my mind. Conscious mind can process between 2 to 60 bits of information per second. Right now, you can perceive that I'm speaking, the color of my clothes, that there is a slide, maybe that your neighbor is doing something or doing nothing. A few things, up to 40, sometimes 50, 60, depends on the circumstances. But the subconscious mind can process 11 million bits of information every single second. It is incredibly and much more powerful than the conscious mind. And a lot of spiritual modalities deal directly with the subconscious mind. I mentioned a few times that I engaged in different learning modalities, and I want to share with you here the list of what has been most helpful to me, at least thus far. First, a list of more of a beginner techniques. Meditation, I'm sure everyone has heard of meditation. It's easy to do. It's free, and you can do it anywhere. Breath work, another incredibly powerful technique. And I'm not talking just about breathing, which is important, and being aware of your breath through meditation. but different techniques of breathing that can help you clean your body, help you clean your mind. Journaling. For the longest time, I thought, oh, that was lame. Why would I journal? Why is this relevant? Well, the reason why it's helpful is because journaling helps you bring stuff from your subconsciousness into your awareness. And the only thing you can deal with is the things that you're aware of. As you write down about your experience, as you write down about your thoughts, your emotions, they come into your awareness. That's how you become more aware of yourself. Perhaps you will discover something similar that I discovered with my shame about selling my product. Something that's stopping you, that it's so irrational, so unreasonable, that you would never think of in your right mind. Yet it's something that's holding you back. Hypnotherapy. Another way to access your subconscious mind. Hypnotherapy helps you get into the state of mind in a brave way when you're suggestible. That's when the reprogramming can happen. That's when you can access those limiting beliefs. First, you can access them by just understanding them, by identifying them, because often we're not aware of those beliefs. And then once you know, you can start changing them. Psyche is another technique that has become incredibly useful to me. In fact, so much so that I became a facilitator. I can now facilitate Psyche sessions. So what Psyche does, it helps align our conscious goals with our subconscious beliefs, and it does this real fast. It also helps relieve a lot of stress from our bodies. Another story of mine, a few years ago, I had an unfortunate accident. I fell from a bicycle directly on my face. I lost my front teeth. The teeth were replaced. However, the trauma stayed within me. So much so that I was identified with PTSD. Every time I thought about the experience of that accident, of that fall, it was as if an electroshock was going through my body. It was my husband who called it out at some point and said, you can't live like that. You have to see someone. I talked to someone about it, and they say you should try Psyche. I'd never heard about Psyche. Long story short, a very short session, 10 minutes, cured me. After that session, because we rewired my memory, we neutralized my memory, I wasn't feeling the shock anymore. So I can think of that accident now, and I can just think of it. It doesn't do anything to me. As a facilitator, I help people with Psyche remove fear of dogs. I helped people improve their golf game. There was one lady who was a good golfer, but couldn't swing on the slope. She could swing well when it was even ground, but not on the slope. We did a short session. There was a limiting belief behind it, that she couldn't do it. We cleared that. Sure enough, next day, her coach was like, what has happened to you? You've changed. You're swinging so well. There's another client of mine that I worked with, a very talented young man, originally from Iran. His family is relatively fortunate in that he was able to move to England and start his acting career there. But he couldn't get himself out of bed. He had all the resources, all the motivation, seemingly, all the talent, but couldn't do anything. As we did the session, we realized that what was holding him back was his guilt vis-a-vis his cousins that were left in Iran. He felt because they don't have the fortunes that I have, and I'm afraid they're going to be envious, I'm not going to take advantage of my gifts. When we neutralized that, he was able to go out and do his thing. In fact, I just caught up with him a few days ago. We did the session in December. He said that session was a catalyst for all the work that he had done over the last few months. So just a few nuggets. to encourage you to explore different modalities when you're thinking about change for yourself, your businesses, or people you look after. Slightly more advanced modalities, energy healing. You may have heard of Reiki or chakra healing. Also very powerful when you're trying to unblock something that's holding you back. Timeline therapy and past life regressions. Past life regression. Does anyone believe here in reincarnation and past lives? Okay, a few. Right. I didn't a few years ago, until my younger son, at the age of 5, started telling me about his past lives. And we thought, oh, what an incredible imagination. How creative is our son? But he wouldn't stop. He was even telling me, Mommy, I was watching you since you were a teenager and you were still blonde. Now, this is not my natural color. I am indeed very light brown-haired, but I've been dyeing my hair black since I was 24. There are no pictures of me that he could have seen. My husband has never seen me with light hair. No one really talks about that because everyone thinks that's my natural color. Yet, he said that. So, that sparked my interest. I started doing research. I did a lot of reading. In fact, there is a book by a famous Californian psychiatrist that I strongly recommend if you're interested in this topic, by Dr. Wise, Many Souls, Many Masters. He was doing hypnotherapy with one of his clients. Nothing helped except for when she started spontaneously regressing into her past lives. And that helped heal her challenges, because they say we carry some of the trauma through different lives. Ceremonies and rituals. A lot of people think about that, when they think about that, think about hallucinogenic plants. I don't necessarily recommend that. I tried mushrooms once. At that point, it wasn't with an intent of personal growth. It wasn't a pleasant experience, and I'm not keen to experience that again. But for some people, it can be a real unlock for tapping into their gifts. Astrology. Now, we're not talking about tabloid astrology. We're not talking about that little line or two that says for the 12th of the world population how their day is going to be. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the power of planets. You know, we all know that the moon moves thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons of water every single day. That's why we have tide. So if we understand that, if we believe that, then it's hard not to believe that other planets also have an impact on us. Yeah. Shamanic practice and spiritual guides, that's linked a little bit with past lives as well, and kind of the spirit world. Again, something I did not believe in at all. I'm actually not religious at all. I grew up in Slovenia, so former socialist country. Similarly to Romania, the church was not encouraged. My parents were very atheist. God forbid, that's a contradiction right there, that I would believe in something like spiritual guides or spirits or past lives indeed. But yet, with opening my heart and opening my mind to everything else that there is around us, I've come to understand that these modalities can be incredibly helpful. Now, let's bring this back to a few more practical implications of what you can do in your life. Start with yourself. I think that is key. If you want to change the world, you have to change yourself first. Meditation is a great start, and I recommend being especially mindful of your thoughts and emotions. We heard earlier, emotions are a perception, and we have power over them. It's not something that happens to us. It's something that we create, and that's why we can also uncreate it. Be open and curious. Maybe astrology is a step too far. Maybe past life regressions are a step too far. Simply be open. We see so little, and we still know so little about the entire universe, this place that we all live in. And so there is a possibility that there are things that we don't know, or that the way we know them are not right. And finally, lead by example. You know, when I thought about what I was going to speak about today, my husband said, "You're crazy. Spirituality? Really?" He's a very rational man. He's a lawyer. We met in law school. He deals with very practical things, and he has a very rational, very analytical mind. I said, "No one's going to listen to you." Okay, I said, "You know what? If I don't say it, then really no one is going to listen to me. But if I do say it, maybe it's going to resonate with someone, and it's going to help them bring about the change that they want in their lives or their businesses." Right. Thank you.
Thank you. You talk about weakness. We don't know how powerful we are. Thank you very much. Stay close because
Do you want me
we
to
see
go
you soon.
back there?
Yes, yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.